Ever wonder what happens to a top researcher's work when they become a journal editor?
Hmm.
Like all that pressure of having to shape the knowledge that gets shared in their field.
It's a great question.
Does it help their research? Or does it
Right.
hurt it?
Well, a researcher named a Guinness,
A Guinness.
yeah, a Guinness, like the beer,
Okay, a Guinness, I like it.
he and his team decided to look into this.
But what did they study?
They took 58 editors
Wow.
from 6 top management journals.
Okay, like what kind of journals are we talking about?
You know, the big ones?
Okay.
Academy of Management Journal, Administrative Science Quarterly, the Journal of Applied Psychology.
Got it. The top of the field.
Yep. And they tracked their research output over 50 years.
50 years.
Yeah, 50 years.
That's crazy. I mean, that's basically a whole career.
It is. It is.
So what did they find? I mean, are we talking about journal editing, turning these folks into superstars?
Mm-hmm.
With all that exposure to cutting-edge research they must be reading. Or is it more like they burn out? Like they sacrifice their own work to help everyone else?
Well, before we get into that,
Yeah.
it's important to remember
Yeah.
just how powerful these editors really are.
Yeah, true.
I mean, they decide what gets published,
Right.
and that shapes entire fields of study.
Yeah, it's like publications are currency in academia.
Exactly.
You publish, you succeed.
And this is exactly why this research is so interesting. So we know a lot about the impact these editors have on the field,
Mm-hmm.
but we know surprisingly little about how the role impacts the editors themselves.
That's fascinating.
It really is.
So that's where a Guinness and his team come in,
Yeah.
trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
Did they have any hunches about what they might find?
They did, actually. They had 2 main hypotheses.
Okay.
The first one was they called it informal and incidental learning.
Informal and incidental learning.
Yeah, so basically the idea is
Yeah.
you're an editor.
Okay.
You're constantly immersed in cutting-edge research,
Right.
new methodologies, all this feedback from reviewers.
You'd think all that would make them a better researcher themselves, right?
Exactly. Like, they're just absorbing all this knowledge.
Yeah, through osmosis.
Exactly.
But I feel like there's a counter-argument here too, right?
There is.
Like, isn't it super stressful being a journal editor?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the other hypothesis, the burnout hypothesis.
Okay.
All those manuscripts to read.
Yeah, and tough decisions to make.
Exactly. Plus all the potential conflicts with authors.
Right.
It's a lot to handle.
That can't be good for your own research.
No, definitely not.
So did the researchers find evidence to support one theory over the other?
They did.
Really? Which one?
It turns out they found support for the burnout hypothesis.
Really?
Yeah, it seems that on average, those editors' research productivity actually peaked during their time as editor, and then it took a nosedive afterward.
So wait, are you saying that all that exposure to top-tier research,
Right.
it didn't help them produce more research themselves?
It seems counterintuitive, I know.
It really does.
But that's what they found.
Wow.
What's going on there?
Well, let's dig into that a little deeper after a quick break. So to really understand these trends,
Yeah.
Guinness and his team used a statistical method called discontinuous growth modeling, or DGM.
Okay, discontinuous growth modeling.
Yeah.
I'm not a statistician, so.
Don't worry, it's not that complicated.
Okay.
Basically, it's like,
Okay.
imagine tracking a growth spurt.
Yeah.
DGM lets you zero in on the specific impact of, in this case, taking on that editor role.
Oh, interesting.
And it helps to separate it from all those other factors that can influence a researcher's career.
That makes sense.
Like how many years they've been publishing before becoming editor,
Yeah.
what kind of institution they're at,
Right.
things like that.
So it helps to isolate the editorship effect, we'll call it.
Exactly, the editorship effect.
So when they zoomed in, what did they find?
Well, this is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay, lay it on me. They looked at all sorts of things, like did the editor have a lot of associate editors to help with the workload? To share the burden?
It seems like that would make a difference.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
They also looked at how many years had they been publishing before taking on the editorship.
Oh, so experience level.
Exactly. They also looked at whether they were at a high-prestige journal.
Okay, so like one of those big names we talked about?
Yeah, one that gets tons of submissions.
Right, because that would probably be more work.
A lot more.
And would that matter? Like when they were an editor?
Yeah, like did they edit in the 1970s versus, say, the 2010s?
Oh, wow.
When the academic landscape was totally different.
Yeah, good point.
So they factored all of that in.
Wow, so did any of that stuff matter?
Surprisingly, no.
No.
None of it
Yeah.
seemed to have a significant impact on that post-editorship decline.
Wow.
It was remarkably consistent across all 58 editors.
So you're telling me it doesn't matter what your background is,
Yep.
what journal you edited,
It does.
how much support you had becoming an editor,
Yeah.
it just seems to have this predictable negative impact on research productivity.
That's what the data suggests.
Wow. So this really got Guinness and his team thinking,
Yeah.
like what are the bigger implications here?
Definitely, because if even the most experienced and well-supported editors
Right.
struggle to keep up their research momentum after their term is over,
Yeah.
what does that say about the system itself?
It's almost like we're setting these folks up to fail.
Kinda, yeah.
I mean, you spend years and years building your expertise.
Right.
Then you take on this huge responsibility as an
A
editor.
very demanding role.
And then you potentially face a decade-long recovery period.
That's a long time.
That seems like such a loss for the field as a whole.
a huge opportunity cost.
You're right.
Guinness and his colleagues actually compared it to
Oh.
a form of voluntary turnover,
Oh, interesting.
like you see in the corporate world. You know, it's not that these editors are leaving academia entirely.
Right.
But their reduced research output, it's like
Yeah.
losing a bunch of valuable employees who take all their knowledge and skills with them.
When they leave.
Exactly.
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah, and it raises the question,
Yeah.
if we know this is happening,
Mm-hmm.
why aren't we doing more to support these editors during and after their terms?
That's a great question. What do they suggest?
Well, Guinness and his team, they actually offer a few potential solutions.
Okay. I like solutions.
Yeah, so they argue that we need to start thinking about editorship differently,
Okay.
not as a stepping stone to research stardom,
Got it.
but as an act of service to the field.
Okay, that's a good point.
And if it is a service,
Right.
maybe we should treat it more like a sabbatical.
A sabbatical.
Yeah.
So instead of expecting them to keep churning out research
Right.
while they're also handling this incredibly demanding role,
It is very demanding.
we give them the space
Yeah.
and the support
the support to really immerse themselves
Yeah.
in the experience.
and then help them transition back into their own research afterwards.
Exactly, because think about it.
Yeah.
During their editorship, they're learning so much.
Right.
Not just about the research itself,
Mm.
but about the review process, how to give good feedback,
Yeah.
how to identify promising new areas of research.
Right. It's like they're getting this informal training.
They are.
It's a PhD in peer review.
Exactly, a PhD in peer review. That's a great way to put it.
So we could be leveraging all this expertise.
We could.
So what kind of support are we talking about here?
Well, Guinness and his team have a bunch of interesting ideas.
Okay.
For starters, they suggest that, professional organizations like the
What?
Academy of Management,
Yeah.
they could create formal mentorship programs.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, where new editors get paired with experienced ones.
I like that, like a passing of the torch.
Exactly,
Yeah.
passing the torch, yeah.
What else? What else?
They also suggest having workshops or panel discussions
Oh, okay.
at conferences specifically for editors,
Makes sense.
so they can connect and share their experiences.
Yeah. Build a community.
Exactly. And they even floated the idea of a standing committee
Okay.
of past editors
Got it.
who could be a resource for the whole field.
So like reviewing research proposals.
Yes.
Mentoring early career scholars.
Exactly.
It's like all those ideas. It's like we need to move away from this
Right.
sink or swim approach to editorship
They do.
and create a system that actually supports these people
Absolutely.
at every stage of the process.
Yeah, but let's be real.
Okay.
Past editors are busy people.
Right.
They've got their own things going on. They're
Yeah.
not just going to volunteer their time and energy for all this.
Yeah. They need a little incentive. Yeah.
Right. And Guinness and his team acknowledge that. They
Okay.
argue that we need to find ways to incentivize these activities,
Okay.
both intrinsically and extrinsically.
So like maybe offer grants specifically for past editors
Yeah.
to synthesize their experiences and share those insights.
Exactly. Or maybe provide course releases or
good.
other forms of recognition.
To recognize and value the expertise they've gained.
Exactly. Because it's not just about the journals themselves. It's
Yeah.
about fostering a culture of knowledge transfer and mentorship within the whole field.
Exactly. And ultimately, it sounds like that's what this research is calling for.
It is.
Like we need to shift our thinking about what it means to be a journal editor
Yeah,
and how we can support them to benefit everyone.
absolutely. Both the individual and the field as a whole.
This is making me think about all those times I've heard
Yes.
senior faculty complaining about feeling burnt out by service obligations.
I hear it all the time.
And They're always saying they wish they had more time for their own research.
Yeah.
Maybe this research can actually help us address that problem.
I think it has the potential to do that.
Ah.
Of course, Guinness and his team are the first to admit
Okay.
that their study has some limitations.
Limitations. Like what?
Well, for one thing, their sample was limited to management journals.
Oh.
So we don't know for sure if these trends would apply to other fields.
Right, like maybe humanities editors have a totally different experience.
It's possible, yeah.
Would be interesting to see more research on this.
Yeah, across different disciplines.
Definitely. What other limitations did they point out?
Well, they also mentioned that they didn't actually measure things like burnout or learning directly.
So we're kind of assuming those things are happening
Yeah.
based on the changes in research productivity.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
There could be other things going on that they didn't account for.
Right, like maybe an editor steps down, decides to focus more on teaching or mentoring,
Yeah.
or even leaves academia altogether.
Right. That's a good point.
It's important to remember this study is just looking at one specific piece of the puzzle, publishing in journals. It's not the whole picture of someone's career.
Absolutely. It's a valuable snapshot,
Yeah.
but it doesn't tell the whole story.
Right, but even with those limitations, this research brings up some really important questions.
I agree.
If editors are learning all this stuff during their time at a journal,
Yeah.
but it's not showing up in their research output later,
Right.
where is all that knowledge going?
That's the big question, isn't it? What happens to all that expertise?
It's like we're missing a huge opportunity to use that knowledge to benefit everyone.
I think so, too.
Imagine if instead of that knowledge fading away,
Yeah.
those editors were actually sharing what they learned
That would be amazing.
through mentorship programs, workshops, even just talking to their colleagues.
Right.
What if we actually valued that kind of knowledge transfer and rewarded it?
What a difference that would make.
It could actually turn editorship into a positive thing for your career.
Absolutely. Both for the individual and for the field as a whole.
Yeah, it's all about changing our mindset.
I agree.
Instead of looking at editorship as some kind of detour from research,
Yeah.
maybe we should see it as valuable training.
Like professional development.
Exactly, a way to learn new skills and perspectives.
That can make all your work better.
I love that this has been such an interesting deep dive.
It has.
It's really made me think about the hidden costs of all the service work academics do
Yeah.
and how we need to find better ways to support the people who take on those roles.
I couldn't agree more.
We need to start valuing knowledge transfer just as much as we value research output.
Absolutely, because what's the point of knowledge if we're not sharing it?
So true. So for all our listeners out there, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
Have you faced similar challenges in your own work?
What do you think we can do to build a better system?
How can we create a culture where knowledge sharing and mentorship are truly valued in academia?
Let us know your ideas.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great talking about this.
Until next time, keep learning
Keep questioning.
and keep those conversations going.